How you doing, Margaret? You doing okay today?
I'm good. How are you?
I
Aside
am
from being
doing well.
cold.
Yeah, it's cold here. I'm in Nepal. I'm in Kathmandu. Um, when Carl and I were in the same time zone for a while, I
Uh-huh.
was in Malaysia. He was in Malaysia. The temperature was, I don't know, 90 degrees every day. And then you go to Jakarta, it's like 80, 90 degrees every day. It could be 10 o'clock at night. It's like 90 degrees. And so you may have a fan on, you may have an AC on, but for the most part, it's nice. Like you're never cold. It's great.
Right.
And then you jump into Kathmandu and you're like, oh my God, 70 degrees, it's freezing. And then at night, it hits like 60 something and it's freezing. And it's like you can never get warm and you just miss those warm nights.
Well, it's
I
all
don't know.
relative, right? Words like hot and cold are relative, right?
It is. Carl one day told me, he says, I was talking to him one day, he says, yeah, it's a little chilly here. And I was like, what? What do you mean? It's like 85 degrees. He says, if I can't sleep without my shirt on, it's chilly. I was like, okay. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. But for the audience, Margaret Kimberley, she is senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report, author, Prejudicial, Black America and the Presidents. And she has a chapter in a new book that she gave me to read, which I even had this conversation with Carl about it. It is called, I just had this book up. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Give me 1 second. I literally just had the book up and I accidentally screwed up. Look, China Changes Everything. That's
Yes.
the name of the book.
Yes.
And your chapter boiled down to effectively China Unleashed.
Yeah.
I renamed it for you, China Unleashed. Basically, the United States can't contain China.
Right.
And your chapter in the book points out the folly of even trying to. And you even give, okay, I don't want to read, I don't want to give the entirety of the thing for you. Um, but your chapter was really good. It went into just basic stuff, like, and stuff that I've come across myself, like this inability, for example, of getting a train to go from point A to point B, like trying to get a train from Richmond to Chicago. Okay, well, I can't really do that. You point out in the book how they have high speed rail,
Yes.
but because the train tracks were so jacked up, that it's not high speed rail,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah. They
just a
made a
small
big
stretch.
deal about saying, we've got high speed rail in the US. No, we don't. We just don't. So there's this one corridor between, I think it's just between, first of all, it's just between Washington and Boston.
Hmm.
And the trains are high speed trains, but the infrastructure was not improved, so it's only really high speed for like 50 miles out of the entire journey, unlike China where high speed rail is high speed rail, thousands of miles, 20, I believe 20,000 miles of track all over China. And that is just an example of China's prowess, economic and technological prowess. And it's because of socialism that they have it. They have a planned economy. The capitalists don't tell the state what to do, the state tells businesses what to do. And the end result is a country that the US cannot keep up with. It is, by some measures, the biggest economy in the world.
Hmm.
And every president has some crazy scheme to try to contain China, tariffs and bans on technology, and none of it phases China. So even though this containing, I mean, the very language is, violent and
Silly.
reeks of superiority. But there is no containing China. Pandora's out of the box. The horse left the barn. You can use whatever analogy you want to use. And the only thing that makes sense for the United States is peaceful coexistence. But the US is devoted to this idea of having hegemony, having primacy. So we'll unfortunately probably see more crazy attempts to do what cannot be done.
What and having the conversation with Carl, and the name of the title of it is China Cannot Be Contained. That's the name of the chapter.
Mhm,
And you effectively break down energy, how
mhm.
even this kind of the disparity between the amount of energy production that China puts out versus the US, greatly different. Meaning, even if you have AI, you can't have AI and this heavy industry simultaneously because the energy production just doesn't work in the US. Even EVs, like we don't even have the power lines in order to do EVs. And yet we're talking about all of this industry and everything else that Trump wants to bring back to the United States. High-speed rail, again, something we doesn't necessarily have in the US. And the manufacturing base and the industrial base of China is astonishing in comparison to the US, meaning they invest money into well-being of the citizenry, whereas we invest $1 trillion into war. You can pick one, but you can't do both.
And to war, and to just allowing these capitalists to make as much money as possible. So, for example, early this year, we first heard about DeepSeek, which was China's an AI platform. And so DeepSeek is rivals ChatGPT in quality. I'm not an AI person, so I can't say which one is better, but everyone who does know about these things says that it is equal, if not superior, to ChatGPT. Cost a fraction of the cost. So ChatGPT, you get investors. So it's market manipulation. The price is inflated. So ChatGPT came into being much less money, and it came into being in part because of efforts to restrict China's access to AI chips. And this was a Biden administration thing. Trump, lest we forget, was not the first to try to do this. So the Biden administration tells American corporations, you can't use Chinese chips, or China cannot have access to your chips. So what does China do? They innovate and they make their own. And they come up with a rival technology that works just as well, that didn't cost as much money, that's open source. So that is an example of what happens with all these foolish efforts to try to contain China.
It put me in the mind of the Soviet Union and the United States in regards to the space race. Whereas the US is like, okay, we need to put $20 billion in order to create an ink pen to write in space. And the Soviets just used the pencil. That's what it kind of put me in mind of. I mean, they were able to create a device that functions just as well, just as capable, for a fraction of a price. And even when you look at our economy, the amount of money that we're dumping into AI, we're dumping billions, like hundreds of billions of dollars. And China is dumping a fraction of it into AI. And yet they're, if not breaking even, very close to breaking even on it. It's amazing. It feels like a Ponzi. Well, I'm not going to call it a Ponzi scheme. Well, it reeks of a certain level of desperation.
Well, the other thing is, speaking of AI, China's electric grid is far superior. So we have this creaky electric grid where these AI data centers are popping up all over the country. We do not have the infrastructure to maintain them. But China has, in fact, an oversupply of electricity. So we have these data centers that are polluting, that are putting a strain on the already decrepit electrical system that nobody wants in their backyard, and for good reason. But China is humming along with this great electrical system, and the United States is committed to this conceit that it can somehow bring China down. I want to say something else. I didn't go into this in my chapter, but I believe that racism is part of this story. China, ever since the rise of European nations and the United States, which were all based on theft, by the way, colonization, enslavement, theft of resources. China has, which hundreds of years ago, China was the superior power in the world. But at any rate, it's hard for the US to accept that a non-white country is a rival. And I believe that's part of the hostility to China. Yes, it's ideological because it's a socialist country. And that's why we hear, endless nonsense about the Chinese Communist Party, It's actually Communist Party of China. It's CPC. But anyway, that's another story. But I think that is a part of this hostility, this jealousy towards China. But it's over. And but the thing that's scary about it is that this nation has not changed the way it views other countries. Other countries are either vassals or enemies. And that China is not going to be a vassal, as Xi Jinping made clear in his meeting with Trump. China's not a vassal, so China's an enemy. So you see, we will see, unfortunately, I predict more military threats against China, trying to encircle China, destabilizing countries in the region to try to get back at China, recolonizing countries like the Philippines, which is now, officially a U.S. colony again. That country went backwards thanks to the U.S. in insisting on trying to fight China, or goading the Japanese prime minister to make foolish statements about China and thinking that Japan won't pay a price, that sort of thing. So unfortunately, that behavior by the U.S. will go on, and I think will intensify over time.
That's assuming we don't go belly up first. Why? Let me explain why I say that. Okay. In the first Cold War, you had a U.S. that was up to the challenge of going against the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And so the U.S. was spending a huge amount of money on planes, bullets, military technology, whereas the Soviet Union was like, okay, well, quantity has a quality of its own, so they will build more, even though it may not have been as high tech, for example. But there was let's say, a strategic balance between the two, especially when you add in nukes. You got the U.S. that would give a little bit of cheddar back to the public in regards to the New Deal, or for the matter of the Great Society, to, let's say, elements of the public. Not everybody was included into those, but elements of the public. Soviet Union collapses. Mm-hmm. Cold War is over. Mm-hmm. The U.S. says, we win. We won. End of history. We're done. we don't have to attend to anybody else now. We can just give money to oligarchs. And then you get this rise of China that is not just a formidable competitor in the way that the Soviet Union was, but exceeded the Soviet Union in regards to its capability. It is far more stable. It is far more, let's say, winning friends around the world, those type of things, ingratiating itself into other countries, building hospitals, bridges, etc. Okay, so now the U.S. is another competitor. But the U.S. hasn't reverted back to the way it was in the Cold War. Instead, what it's decided to do is pull a Tanya Harding. And it's like, okay, I need somebody to hit China in the knees. Meaning we need to contain, not compete. There's a difference in these things, right? Like if both of us are playing chess and I'm trying to get my rating up, and you decide to hit me in the knees one day, then I'm walking to the tournament. Okay, that's different than you competing with me and saying who's going to be the best player. Why the difference? Like, why is it that the end of history thing hasn't evaporated? And the U.S. gets back into this mindset of, okay, now we need to compete again in the way that we did with the Soviet Union. That doesn't seem to be the way we're thinking about this.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that after the Soviet Union collapsed, that the welfare state was under attack immediately, because we had a welfare state to compete with them. That was back in the 30s during FDR. There was a very strong left movement. And the way to compete with them was to give people something. So you started the Social Security system, for example. And there had to be a way to tell people, oh, it's okay here. We take care of you. We've got Social Security. We've got public assistance. We've got, Medicare, Medicaid in the 60s, as you were pointing out, the Great Society programs. And the minute the Soviet Union collapsed, we were told socialism doesn't work. You get nothing. And it's not a coincidence. Right. So anyway, I just wanted to amplify that point you made. So the U.S. was the sole superpower for decades, and has not shown any inclination to change that fact. So now we have, as you said, it's the oligarchs who rule. We're not doing anything for you unless you already have something, right?
Yeah.
So the rich are getting, literally, rich are getting richer. The poor are getting poorer. I've been to China twice, and my measure of a society is whether or not I see people sleeping on the street. And I have been to 6 or 7 large Chinese cities. I never, ever once saw anybody who was sleeping on the sidewalk like you see here in New York or any major American city. And I'm not saying that there is not any unhoused person anywhere in China, but it's pretty clear when you see how cities are maintained, when you see the infrastructure, you can tell a lot about a country. And this is a country that is dedicated to taking care of its people. It's obvious. Everything, technology works so well. All these things that we don't have, when you see it for yourself, it's very clear how the U.S. is lacking. So, but the U.S. now, these oligarchy are entrenched. The ruling class rule. It's not an accident that we saw right after the Soviet Union collapsed. We got welfare, quote unquote, reform, meaning, and you had, and I don't think I didn't appreciate at the time. I was not as smart back in those days. What it meant for 60 years to have the right to seek public assistance. And then suddenly you didn't have it. And lo and behold, people are poorer, people are struggling, people who are unhoused, every measure of the health of a society, we don't see in this country. Everything was, and there was a reaction also. There was a reaction even before the collapse of the Soviet Union. There was a counter revolution from the early 70s that we're not doing this again. We're not letting people protest. We're not going to let any mass movements determine that there's going to be something called Medicare and Medicaid couldn't be passed today.
No, it couldn't be. No. Or Social Security.
No, none of it.
No.
None of it. So I'm sorry, I rambled a little bit and I kind of lost my place. But at any rate, we can see why the United States is so firmly entrenched as this military power and economic power that didn't have any rivals. So now the U.S. cannot stand for Venezuela to exist as a socialist state and is on the verge of being attacked. Not just to show Venezuela, but to show Russia, to show China. You can't help Venezuela. You may be friends, but you're not here. We are. It's our backyard, as it were. We can bomb fishing boats. We can decapitate the president. We can put in somebody else and take their oil. Trump is different in that he says these things out loud. We're going to get their oil. So this is a moment in which the U.S. is determined to continue these dynamics, determined not to change them, to get Japan to stir up trouble about Taiwan. Let me remind people, there's a one China policy. That's official U.S. policy. You wouldn't know it, but it's official U.S. policy. There's one China. Taiwan is China. And telling this silly prime minister in Japan, you got to go make trouble over Taiwan, and they get smacked down. China has cut flights. China said, we don't have to buy seafood from Japan. They were trading partners. They have ruined their relationship with China, all because the U.S. told them to do it.
Silly, what did they call it? Silly children or whatever, the silly thing, tricks are for kids. I mean, these countries never seem to get the hint that it never works out well for them. I mean, like the Ukraine thing, or Taiwan, for example, or Japan in this case, the Philippines. Like none of these, it never works out well for them, and yet they still follow the edicts of the hegemon. I guess my thing is, the U.S. has, let's say, structural issues that it doesn't seem to be able to attend to, and a political space. And this is a good transition. The political space seems completely incapable of doing anything about those structural issues in a way that China seems to function on those issues. Meaning, from China's point of view, we're going to raise 800 million people out of poverty.
Mhm.
Okay, that's like nearly three times the size of the United States. Meaning,
Yes.
they pulled more people out of poverty than nearly 3 times the size of the United States. Whereas if you go to California, you have hundreds of thousands of people who are literally living on the streets,
Yep.
like in shanty towns. That is
Mhm.
not our focus. That is not our objective. The big, beautiful bill, quote unquote, that Trump passed is effectively a suction cup of money from the poor to the
Mhm.
rich.
Yes.
Like, these things are not sustainable. I mean, we're already $38 trillion in debt, and this is going to go through the stratosphere after the midterms when the big, beautiful bill comes into fruition. We can't compete. I mean, but we don't even be able to try to compete. And if you look at the political space, there is nothing in the political space that allows a solution to this issue at all. Oh, correct me if I'm wrong. Because from
Well,
my point of view,
you're not wrong. You aren't wrong at all. We have a political system that does not serve the needs of the people. You know, when people talk about the Democrats, because the Democrats, they were, for decades, they were the party that protected the welfare state or expanded the welfare state, as we were just discussing. But now we have two parties under the rule. We live under billionaire rule. And I was just, I was just thinking about the fact, not only are the rich getting richer, but everything we see, everything we hear is controlled by Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, all of these people control everything coming, the information space for us. They can decide that you're not going to hear something. They can dissuade people from protesting. And at the same, so the only so-called protest is something like the No Kings thing, which was the Democratic Party get out the vote effort.
Yes.
That's not a bad thing, but just be clear about what it was and what it was not. So we have, people, $1 billion to run for president. What does that tell you? Who has access to Democrats or Republicans? So we have the people who really run the country, who tell presidents what to do, are determined not to give an inch, not to give a penny. And we just see in Trump the most, grotesque form of this. But the Democrats, they always have, when Biden was president, they always had these pretend villains, like professional wrestling, pretend good guys, pretend bad guys. So it was Manchin and Sinema. Well, we could have a Build Back Better, but Manchin and Sinema, it's always something. Or the recent shutdown, this complete caving of the Democratic Party. I mean, they never intended to stand up. So they pick 8 people. Some are about to retire. None of them have to run in 2026. So they pick 8 people. Okay, you're going to be the bad guys. You're going to give in. They gave in and got nothing. Absolutely nothing. So that Obamacare, for example, which was a giveaway, lest we forget, to insurance companies, they have made a fortune ever since. But the people who depend on it for insurance are out of luck. They have to choose between paying a lot more or going without insurance. And that is, in the end of the day, that's just fine with the oligarchs and their representatives, the Democrats and Republicans. So unfortunately, we are going to see more of this. And so they may tell you, you can't get a Huawei phone, but Huawei isn't going anywhere. It's more
Right.
about, they tried to, I think the first Trump administration, they said U.S. government agencies can't contract with businesses who use any Huawei components. And the Defense Department requested an exemption because they said Huawei is so firmly entrenched around the world that you couldn't find a replacement.
Right.
But there is no giving in, no compromise. So everything that they failed. So Trump with his, the tariffs. And it was hilarious to me when he met Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping who could barely contain his contempt, which
Yes.
I thought it was hilarious. Trump's like, we're friends. They're shaking hands. Oh, this is my friend Xi Jinping. We get along. And Xi Jinping was like, if you were a bug, I would step on you. And he did step on him. They rolled back all those tariffs. The Chinese said, they got soybeans in Brazil, right? They've got beef in Australia. We don't have to buy anything from you. So we see the U.S. fail. And you can say it's Trump being, foolish, but it's always something like that. It's always some gambit that isn't going to work because the U.S. insists on having superiority, having primacy over the rest of the world. So they may have a setback with their tariff plan, but they have not given up.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. Yeah, that's deeply unfortunate. Yeah, I saw that meeting where they first met, and Xi Jinping looked like he just didn't want to be there, didn't want to be bothered, couldn't stand him. The contempt is the right word for it. It seems like the U.S. has backed off a little bit, but that's temporary because they just didn't have a choice. Like they've met an equal for the first time, and they just couldn't resolve.
So they'll step back. So in this case, they step back, and then the next thing you know, they got some Dutch company to seize a Chinese company, and China smacked them down. And then and then it was like, oh, did we say we're taking your company? No, we're not. And then it's the Japanese prime minister stirring up trouble about Taiwan. So they never give up. Clearly there is a determination to continue these policies that fail, that don't help the U.S., but they don't care about, just as they don't care about the American people, about people being poor or being homeless or struggling to make ends meet. All their end game is the same: to stretch other countries. That's what they're doing in Ukraine. That's why there's no Ukraine peace deal. They don't want one. They want to stretch Russia. They want Russia to have to be in this war, and perhaps they can make Russia weak, and then maybe it'll be just like Syria and all kinds of craziness. And that's the story with China as well. So this losing strategy is going to continue because they don't see themselves as losing. And we and people around the world are going to be the losers.
Yeah, it's backfiring. I mean, it's backfiring in Ukraine as we speak. I mean, the only reason the 28-point plan is out is because Russia is effectively dominating. They will take the Donbass. They've just taken Pokrovsk. What is the other location? Volchansk. So they just announced both of those. Anytime you see Putin in a military outfit, hell's breaking loose. Like there's something that he's announcing, like when he's in his military fatigues. He's like,
it's a message.
Yeah, it's a message. Like just the fatigues by themselves. They've taken something else.
Yeah.
They are going to, within 6 months or so, end up with all of Donbass. And we can't do anything about it. And the Russian military that started off at 150,000 is now at nearly 1 million men. This is not success. Yes, you might have extended Russia in the context of the war. Agreed. And obviously Russia didn't want to be in the war. Agreed. But you have lost magnificently, and Europe has taken a magnificent hit on top of Russia winning that war. It's not like their economy stopped. All of those things effectively kept going. So these schemes don't seem to be working in the way that they think that they're working, but it seems to be all they have. And what makes it so bad, I want to show you this. Donald Trump came in, was supposed to do fantastic things about the economy, was supposed to do amazing things about not intervening in other countries, supposed to do amazing things about immigration, supposed to fix America. We're going to make America great again. What are we, 9 months in, 10 months in? This is the polling on this.
I mean, it's a disaster if it holds towards the midterm elections. And I should note, of course, it's not alone. I mean, just take a look here. This is Gallup. This is the longest running poll. You know, Gallup has been conducting polls since my father was a kid, and my father was born in 1927, had me in the 60s. Look at this in January. Donald Trump's not approving. Not too bad, not too great. It was at -1 point, right within the margin of error, breaking even. But look at this now. Negative 24 points, way down. We're talking about a drop of over 20 points in the wrong direction for the president of the United States. Minus 24 points, that's a 23-point move in the incorrect direction if you're the president. And of course, what's so important here, Sarah Seidner, is it matches the trend that we've seen with other polls, that is Donald Trump hitting his low for the second term. I was doing the count last night. I think we're up to 10 polls in sort of the last 40 days, 10 different pollsters who have said that Trump is at the lowest point he is in his second term.
He has dropped 23 points in 10 months. That is astonishing. And the only other president that's close to Trump at this point is Richard Nixon. Tricky Dick.
Glad to resign.
Yeah. What pisses me off about this is there are some cynical Democrats, let's say like Nancy Pelosi, who would sit back and say, just let Trump be Trump. And when you look at Chuck Schumer and what he did was, we're going to fight a little bit and then we're going to give up. It's that, right? Like if you are very cynical and you don't really care about anything, you don't want anything to change, and you want the political process to stay the way it is because that's the process that got you in power. And you say to yourself, how do we get back in power without offering anything? I know, let Trump be Trump. And then you go 10 months and he drops 23 points, which will have a dramatic effect on congressional elections when you get into the midterms, which means without doing anything, without offering anything, without having any policy, without having any kind of new model of doing politics, Democrats are going to be swept right back into power. Nothing changes. Back and forth. That's so frustrating.
That's the nature of bourgeois democracy. So you have these parties that have some differences, but it's essentially, they're both capitalist parties.
Yes.
They're both pro-war parties. They differ in many ways, but not in those fundamentals. So one makes a pitch that wins the public over. They get in. Inevitably, they don't meet the people's needs. Somebody else makes a better pitch, they get in. And so round and round we go. So Democrats are in a good position to win the midterms. And what are they going to do with it? So first of all, a lot of the worst parts of the big, beautiful bill don't go into effect until after the midterms. Trump still wins. The Democratic Party is not driven by any kind of ideology. They are the errand boys and errand girls of the oligarchy. And they will always find a way to keep from doing what the people want them to do. So so Trump will try to, gerrymander and get more safe Republican seats in the House. And he might succeed at doing that. But that kind of approval rating or disapproval rating, I guess is more accurate, is going to make that a little harder. So in 2028, somebody else will make a different pitch. I don't know. I can't predict who's going to win the presidency the next time, but the Democrats are more of a brand. They're like a money laundering operation as far as I'm concerned. They aren't a real political party. They're not driven by any ideology that favors the people. They are driven by an ideology, but it's not one that benefits us. The billionaires are still in control. And that is where we are politically. And I guarantee you, if Democrats get back in and they control Congress, they will not undo what Trump has done. That's a prediction I will make.
Yeah. What Obama enshrined 83% of those tax cuts in the law when he got back
they were
in power.
supposed to be temporary. Remember the temporary tax cut?
Yep, from George Bush. He enshrined them in the law. One of the other things you mentioned was Venezuela. I got to be honest, I've been fascinated by the conversation that's been taking place around Venezuela. So they have been giving Hegseth a lot of, let's say, grief because apparently he ordered a boat double tapped. So they hit the boat. The people apparently lived and were hanging on the side of the boat. And then he hit the boat again in order to murder the people in the boat. And they look at them and they say, whoa, it's outrageous that you hit it twice. I said, wait a minute, it's outrageous you hit it the first time.
Exactly.
and then you get Trump, who is obviously crafting a lie in order to attack and murder a bunch of Venezuelans. And that doesn't seem to be the issue. They take issue with the fact that they double tap the boat.
Yeah.
That is so wild to me that that's the issue that they come up with. I'm amazed by that.
I know it's, the way we've seen this over and over again. When a president wants a war, everybody goes along. The corporate media go along. You might hear a few voices in Congress in opposition. I can't think of any. And when Democrats have spoken up, they say things like, "Well, you've got to come to Congress to get our permission to wage a war." Well, what would you say if he asked you permission? Would you tell him no? So they'll say things like that. Nobody points out that everything Trump has said about drug dealing in Venezuela is a lie, is easily proven to be a lie. I mean, look how these little boats, they can't get to the nearest U.S. territory to Venezuela is Puerto Rico, and it's 500 miles from Venezuela. Those little boats would have to refuel multiple times in order to get from Venezuela to Puerto Rico. Now, and this is and most of the drug trafficking from South America is on the Pacific coast. So countries like Ecuador, which has a U.S. puppet government, that's the big drug trafficking country in South America, not Venezuela. But how many articles? There was one somewhat decent New York Times article, but there has been very, very little pushback about what are clearly lies. This is a policy going back decades to undermine Venezuela's socialist government. The sanctions in the first Trump administration killed more than 40,000 people in Venezuela. This is also an effort to bring down Cuba. Venezuela sends its oil to Cuba, and they believe that they can also finally bring down the Cuban revolution. So this is an effort at the U.S., and no one will say, nobody in Congress has said, the United States does not have the right to decide who runs Venezuela. Period. No. That's it. That's all.
Including Mamdani, the Democratic savior, who in his recent interview was out there saying, Maduro's a dictator, he's a horrible guy, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, they are literally trying to overthrow a government. For one, who the hell are you? Like, who the F are you to do that, right? These are the same people who've been complaining about Russia and Venezuela and Ukraine that have flipped over like McFall. It's like, yeah, I'll get rid of the guy. Okay. Hegseth has been trying to create distance. In fact, all of them have been trying to create distance. Trump is like, yeah, Hegseth was doing his job and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if he did it or not. Hegseth comes out and blames the military commander who Hegseth gave the order to. Let's make it crystal clear. Admiral Mitch Bradley is an American hero, a true professional, and has 100% support. I stand by him and his combat decisions he has made on the September 2nd mission and all other since. America is fortunate to have such men protecting us. When this Department of War says we are going to back up warriors, we mean it. Now, this sounds like he's giving support. What he's doing is creating distance. I support his
man under the bus.
Yeah.
Admiral Bradley was pushed under the bus. It's like, I did. So they first asked Trump, he's like, oh, he didn't say that. Now, this was leaked to the Washington Post last week, the double tap story. And as you point out, everybody's upset. Oh, no, 2 taps, not just one. But so they're nervous enough about it that suddenly it wasn't Hegseth, it was Admiral Bradley who did it. And that is just, I support Admiral Bradley 100%. I support him to shut the hell up and not tell people that I gave this order. So they shoved this guy under the bus. But it's sad to me that Venezuela is getting so little attention. I think I believe the crackdown on the Palestine solidarity protests has done it. It did the job they wanted it to do. People are afraid of protest, and so many people don't pay attention, or they believe what they're told, or any number of things. Now, people are not in favor. I mean, the approval. I mean, it's only like 30% of people who say the U.S. should attack Venezuela. It's truly awful that there's no real opposition party. that the media, in fact, are part of. They help the state drive these narratives. So if you see one decent story in the New York Times, I was like, oh my God, they're acknowledging drug trafficking is on the Pacific coast. And then Trump, this is what cracked me up, the former president of Honduras, who was a convicted drug trafficker, he's going to pardon him. Now that is uniquely Trumpian. Any other president would say, let's wait till after the Venezuela thing is over. This isn't a good time to do this, but not Trump. But why shouldn't he be that way? Who opposes him? Who stops him? So,
and by the way, we put Hernandez in office, if you remember. Like they took Zelaya out in his pajamas in the Obama era.
And who did that? That was Hillary Clinton's baby.
Yep. So
he's not the first president, not the last, to interfere in the affairs of other countries in the region. This is the U.S. has a long and ignoble history in the Caribbean, Central America, South America, of trying to control other nations. They have bought off Caribbean nations. Venezuela, Trinidad, for example, Trinidad and Tobago is just a few miles off the coast of Venezuela. So they installed radar there. They've done something similar in Guyana, right next door to Venezuela. The CARICOM nations, Caribbean Community nations, are also under attack by the U.S., being cajoled / forced to go along. Now they have some people who are happy to be puppets. Maybe they're not being forced as much as I think, but this is not what people in the region want. The people in the region want a zone of peace, as the nations in the regions declared back in 2014. They do not want their countries to be undermined. They don't want to be under America's thumb. They don't want to help the U.S. kill people in Venezuela. They want control over their own destiny. They want self-determination. But that's not what they get. They get the U.S. stirring up trouble between Guyana and Venezuela. There's a disputed border between, and it goes back to the 1800s. But both countries have oil. Guess what? What a surprise! So we see the United States doing what it always does, asserting that it can do what it wants to do wherever in the world it should choose. And if people have to suffer in Venezuela, so be it. If Japan has to create problems of its own with China, so be it. We are going to do, I don't speak of in the first person when I speak of the state, I'm quoting them. They say we're going to do what we want to do. And in the face of a lack of opposition, unfortunately, they probably can. I mean, who knows how it will turn out, but they can get away with doing whatever it is they ultimately choose to do in Venezuela. They will be able to do.
Yeah, I always said there's no such thing as international law. And it's for stuff like this. There is no hedge short of inability to accomplish your objective. But
no, there isn't. It's a war crime. I mean, what they did, bombing these boats, is a war crime. But there's, what the U.S. is doing in Gaza is a war crime. I mean, there's war crimes. How many more war crimes? How much time do we have, right, to count up all of the war crimes are defined. Genocide is defined by a convention, 1948 convention. War crimes are defined by the Geneva Conventions. There is no question about what does and doesn't constitute a war crime. But nobody cares. The people who have the power to stop it are either in cahoots with each other, or they're not strong enough to fight back.
To do anything about it. Do you think this is a bluff? And this could be the last question. Or do you think at this point, so much military hardware, so much publicity has gone around it, there's no way to back out of this, a safe face?
I don't see them sending aircraft carrier groups down there and then doing nothing. I think they're trying to get all their ducks in a row. Now they've made up a new story. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal story. Now they're saying Venezuelan drug dealers are in league with jihadists in Africa to send drugs to Europe. I mean, it was the crazy.
Are you serious?
Yes. Yeah, you look it up. I mean, it was just absurd. It was like now they're, throwing mud against the wall just to see what sticks. but they're in a trap of their own making. They want to do it. I know Rubio wants to do it, lest we forget he's the leader of the Cuban, right-wing Cubans who want to stamp out socialism wherever, and as I pointed out also, harm Cuba in the process. So there are people who want it. Hegseth, he's a maniac. Of course, he wants to do it. Does Trump want to do it? And I suspect that's the issue. The president has to be behind it. Now, do they want to do this while they're also trying to have a fake ending to the Ukraine war? Do they want to do this while they're also fighting with China? So there are some risks. How will it turn out? Let's say you bomb Maduro's house and you get rid of him. Does that mean that his party is out of power? Does that mean you can safely put somebody back into power? No one knows. So there are a lot of unknowns. I suspect that's the only reason they have not moved. But it would be very, very strange for them to send a carrier group, to put radar in Trinidad, to do all of these things and then do nothing. I think they want to do a decapitation strike. That would be militarily the easiest thing to get away with, but they don't know what comes after. And so apparently, but who knows? It could start today. So we don't know. But I'm surprised it has not happened yet.
Margaret Kimberley, always appreciate you. I really do. I swear I do.
Thank you.
Margaret Kimberley, she's senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report, author of Presidential Black America and the Presidents. Also, there is this new book that she has a chapter in, just so all of you can. Oh, you already got it up. Fair enough.
Yes,
I was going to show it.
That's my old book. Yes, you can.
Oh, that's presidential.
Yes.
Well, this is the new one. China changes everything.
Changes everything, and you can buy it where you buy other books. But I recommend buying it from the International Action Center, iacenter.org, and just scroll down a little and you can get the book at a very nice discount. There are more than 30 chapters covering many of the things we talked about, the U.S. Military rivalry, what China has achieved as a socialist state. So it's a great book. Everybody should read it.
It really is. I had the opportunity to go through several chapters of the book. It is very good. And I definitely appreciated your chapter one. In fact, I was talking to Carl about elements of the book when him and I were talking earlier today. So thank you for this. You be safe. You have a great day or the rest of your day. And I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Always appreciate talking to Margaret. I really do. We have come to the end. She is one of my favorite guests. So I always appreciate when she joins me. And let's hit the chat because I have a lot of work that I need to do to